All right, good morning, everybody. So welcome to problem solving, and this will be our first lecture. So let me just go over what we're going to do. We're doing ratios and everything else, okay? Ratios and proportions. All right, so let's have a look at what we're going to do here. Go. You know what would help? This would help. Share. Okay, you can go away. All right. So I thought I'd start off with one that looked a little familiar to everybody who's worked an hourly wage. So this one says, okay, if you're paid this amount of money for so much work, then what should you be paid for 34 hours of work? Okay, so we work a certain amount for 24 and a half hours, then the next week we get 34 hours. What should our pay be then? Okay, so what I'm going to do is Shift Windows S and go ahead and grab our problem. All right, get our notes, and there we go. And Control V. All right. So here we go. Now I know that you have mostly all done this problem. Okay. In this case, they don't tell us the rate of pay; they just tell us the total pay, and any hours of work. Okay. So normally what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to calculate like, well, what hourly rate do we make? Okay, so we have 23.8 per 24 and a half hours. So this is dollars, this is our hours. Okay, and then we are going to go ahead and grab a calculator. Okay, my apologies, this is the calculator that I have. Okay. So we're going to say this is 238.28 per 24.5 hours. Okay, wow, that's low. Okay, we end up with $9.70. We'll call it 3. Okay, dollars per hour. Okay, and then we're going to say, well, we need 34 hours. So we're going to take 34 hours times $9.73 per hour. And one thing you can kind of do is you can see like, well, there's hours on the top, hours on the bottom, so they can kind of cancel. The only variable, the only unit we're left with is this dollars. So that's something to think about for a little bit later. Okay, but we're going to take 34 hours, right, times, okay, you see this little second function, you see that little answer down there? That just takes what our previous answer was and puts it in the calculator for us. So we don't have to remember this, okay? And get an answer, and we get 330.67, okay? 330.67, and that is our weekly wage here. That is one way to do it, okay? Another way to do this, okay, is we're going to take our pay 1 divided by our pay 2, and then we're going to have our hours, right? Our time 1 and our time 2. Okay, so we're just going to set these ratios equal to each other. So we have $238.28, okay, is for 24 and a half hours. And then I don't know what my pay 2 is, but I do know that we worked for 34 hours. So we'll pay 1 to hours 1, pay 2 to hours 2. Okay, that's what we're doing here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to cross multiply. So we're going to get 238.28, right, times 34 hours, and that is equal to 24.5 times P2. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and simplify that first one because I can't do that arithmetic in my head. So this is 238.28 times 34. Okay, and I'm not going to worry about the other side. So that is 8,101. 8,101, and I believe 52 is there, right? 52. Check 52. and this is equal to 224.5 times P2. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and divide by 24.5 on both sides. 24.5. Okay, so all we're going to be left with is just this P2. Okay, and that is equal. I'm just going to go ahead and divide it. Takes the last answer divided by 24.5 equals, and we end up with $330.68. Okay. $330.60. What do we have? 67 cents. Okay. So we're pretty close. Okay, we're pretty close. So that's there might be a round off error in here somewhere. In this case, there wasn't. Okay, so we got the same thing. So that's how we're going to go ahead and solve these, because you're not always going to be afforded like $1 per hour. You're not always going to be afforded a thing that you know about. Okay, you might be, but often you won't be. Okay, and I'm going to set it up this way because I've got ulterior motives. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the next problem we have planned. We are going to go ahead and take a look at question 3. Okay, so in this case, we have horsepower. So we have horsepower as its displacement. And you see this, it says varies directly. That's what we want, because there's a varies inversely and it varies directly. Okay, so that's what those are the words you want to pay attention to, is varies directly or varies it's a 1 over. It's yeah. So what we're going to try to do for that, okay, so this is varies directly. So again, what I'm going to do is, this didn't work out too well last time, so I don't know what that's going to deal with, but okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and grab this. Okay, wish there was a way I could shrink it real fast. Something I should work on. We're going to go ahead and go to page 2. Okay. Control V. See, this is a lot. Scroll all the way over here. Okay, horsepower is developed by an engine. Horsepower developed by an engine varies directly as its displacement. Okay. How many horsepower will be developed by an engine with a displacement of 370 cubic inches, if that of the same kind which develops 210 horsepower? It's a weird way of saying it, I think, but okay, not to worry. Okay, so what we're going to have, okay, is we have horsepower 1. I'm just going to call it H1 for horsepower over H2, and that's going to change as volume 1 and volume 2. Okay, so because it varies directly versus inversely. Okay, so it's direct versus inverse. Okay, so what do we know? Okay, that's one of the big problems with word problems, is like, what do you know? So this first half is all talking about the question. The second half gives us some information. So we have a 370 cubic inch engine, which has 210 horsepower. Okay, so what we're going to do, okay, we had 210 horsepower, right? And we had a 370 cubic inches. Okay, volume, horsepower. And then what else do we need to know? Okay, they want how much horsepower for 240 cubic inches. So horsepower 1 over 240. By the way, it doesn't matter if you called one H1 and the other one H2. Okay, the ratio is the important part, and it'll work out. Okay, so it might look a little different. You might have this on the bottom, but after you've cross multiplied, you'll have the same expression. So I don't want you to worry about like, which one do I put where? It doesn't matter. Okay, as long as you keep the ratios together like this, you'll be fine. Okay, so we have 370 times H1 cross multiplying is equal to 210 times 240. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So we've got 210 times 240. We have 50,400. So this is 50,400. That is equal to 370 times H. Okay. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to divide by 370, divide by 370, and we get H is equal, it's a semicolon. Okay. I know my handwriting is worse than terrible. We have 50,400, okay, divided by 370, right? End up with 136.21. This is 136.21. We go back to our problem statement. Unfortunately, I've already done it, but round to the nearest whole number. So we drop the decimals because it's 0.1, so we just throw that off, and we're left with 136. Okay. So let's do one more, and then I'll start another video for the next topic. Okay. So let's go ahead. We're going to look at problem number 1. Okay. This is the one that looks scary. Notice they start with number 1, which looks the worst, and like number 8 is the one that you're familiar with. So delightful, right? So let's go ahead and I'm just going to copy this little part here. That's all I really need. Okay. So back to OneNote, I hope. Wow, this is a small board here. Oh, I got a page right here. Section 4.2, 4.2, page 3. We'll put that up there. We've got 2 triangles, right? We've got 2 triangles going on here. We have, pretend that's a triangle. Same with that one. And pretend they look the same. Okay. So we've got an A, we've got a C, we've got a B, we've got a D. Let's just double check. A, C, B, and D. Okay, we're good. Okay. A, C, B, and D. Okay, so what we're going to do here, and there's several ways to do this. Okay, the way I would set this up, let's say C over A is to D over B. If you've ever had trigonometry, right, there's trigonometric, there's a triangle ratio that talks about the adjacent side. I'm looking at this angle here. That looks at the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. Okay, adjacent side over the hypotenuse. There was a pretty horrible demonstration this year from high school trig teacher. I will not repeat it, but that's how I would do it for this one. But notice that C over A is equal to D over B, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, this is A over B because we're just cross multiplying here, right? We have A over B, and that is equal to C over D because we're going to multiply over there. Okay, so again, just cross multiply really. Okay. So we have hypotenuse over hypotenuse. We have adjacent over adjacent. Okay. So again, it does matter how you set it up, but as long as you end up with a ratio that looks like a hypotenuse to a hypotenuse and an adjacent to an adjacent, you're going to be okay. Okay, but there's multiple ways to do this. So what we're going to do here, because I'll do part A because it looks the scariest. Okay, we have 8 1/2 inches. Okay, and then my B, right, is 1 3/4 inches. And then our C, that is 4 1/4 inches. And then D, we don't know. Okay, so we have hypotenuse to hypotenuse. So we have effectively we have H1, H2. We have adjacent over adjacent to. Okay, we're setting up this as a ratio. Okay. I can't divide things like 4 1/4 and 8 1/2 divided by 1 1/4. I don't know how to do that. Fractions were never good for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to change them to improper fractions, going from mixed to improper. So we have 17 halves. Okay, we have 1 3/4, which is 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 quarters here. Okay, we have 4 1/4. So that is equal to 16. 4 times 4 is 16, plus the 1 is 17 quarters. Okay, so I'm going to go back and say, okay, well, we have 17 halves here. Oops, I'm going to do 17 halves divided by, right, 1 3/4, which is 7 quarters. This is equal to, what the heck, this is 17 quarters over here. Right, it's 4 1/4 divided by D. All right, so hopefully, I hope that made sense. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to cross multiply. So we're going to say this is 17 halves times D. We're not going to complicate it by dealing with the fractions. We're just going to multiply. And then we have 17 quarters times 7 quarters. Okay, now I'm not going to multiply this together just yet because I'm looking at this 17. I'm thinking something fishy about this. I'll bet that's there for a reason. So what we're going to do next is we're going to solve for D. So I'm going to go ahead and take, this is 2/17 D is equal to 17 quarters times 7 quarters times, we'll multiply by 2/17. Okay, this is 17 halves here. So we have 2/17. Notice that all of this cancels out. Okay, 17 halves is this one. I'm just multiplying by the reciprocal, turn it upside down, by the reciprocal of the 17 halves. So it's 2/17. So this all cancels. Okay, we don't have to multiply by 17 halves over here because it didn't start over here. Okay, we're just multiplying both sides by the same thing. So look at this. There's a 17, there's a 17. Aha. Okay, so we have this 2 to take into that 4, so we just have 2 left. Okay, 2 of that. So here we have 7, because there's nothing else on the top. We just multiply all the way across. 17 times 7 times 2, except the 17 is canceled and the 2 canceled. So we just have 17 times 1, or 7 times 1 rather. Divided by 4 times 2 is 8. The 17 canceled, we don't worry about it. So we end up with a 7/8 for D. Okay, 7/8 for D. Over here, oops, D is, I see that's not right. Yeah, 7/8 here. Okay, check it. Boom, there we go. Okay, and then we have to go through and do the rest. Okay, but I'm going to do the typical math book thing and say exercises left for the reader. Okay, if we have questions about this, by all means ask. I will be happy to do some of these, okay, demonstrate them, but I think you have the right idea. And if you get the same one, then you have a worked out problem for yourself. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save the rest for part 2 and see how far we get there. Okay, so I will see you in the next video.